If the world ended today, would you survive? I'm not talking about fiction, nor a movie apocalypse. I'm talking about something real and inevitable. What you're about to discover now isn't just ancient history. It's an ancient code of survival, hidden for over 4,000 years, and left here for such a moment as this. Many people think Noah's Ark is just a children's story, a narrative for coloring books. But what if I told you it's actually a map, a precise escape plan? What if I showed you that every measurement, every detail, every decision Noah made carries a direct message for us today? Before we continue, understand something. Knowledge is the strongest shelter there is. It's what separates those who sink, from those who weather the storm. And if you want to be one step ahead when the first drops of this new deluge begin to fall, build your shelter right now. Here, it's simple. Just click subscribe and activate the bell, because each new alert we release will be like another plank in your own arcane. Receiving these alerts in time can be the difference between preparing, and being caught off guard. Imagine you wake up and the world still seems normal. The sun is shining, the streets are bustling, people are going about their daily lives. But behind the scenes, something silent is brewing. A financial collapse, a global crisis, a natural disaster. It was like this before the flood. It was like this when Noah began building his ark, while everyone laughed. And therein lies the first lesson. Danger rarely arrives with sirens. It comes disguised as normality until it's too late. Noah didn't begin preparing when he felt the first drops. He began much earlier, guided by a warning few believed. Today, you're receiving a warning too. The question is, will you listen or will you laugh? What you're about to see will change the way you view this story forever. We'll explore not only the biblical account, but also historical evidence, records from other civilizations, engineering secrets, and hidden symbolism that recur in different cultures around the world. And, most importantly, we'll decipher how to apply these principles to your life now, so that when the storm comes and you'll already be safe inside your own ark. The truth about Noah isn't what you learned in school. It's not what's in cartoons. It's a message of survival, a key hidden in plain sight, but one that almost no one bothers to turn. And once that key is turned, there's no turning back. The story begins long before the first drop of rain, long before the sound of creaking wood as the ark closed. It begins at a time when humanity had forgotten what it meant to live in harmony with its own existence. The streets, if we can even call them, that were the scene of violence, deceit, and greed. Trade was unfair, words were lies, and alliances were as fragile as glass. Men and women lived for themselves. There was no longer room for compassion, nor for honor. The world had become an arena where the strong crushed the weak, and no one seemed to care. It was in this scenario that the voice came, a voice that didn't scream, but pierced through the bones. It didn't echo like an external sound. It was something internal, deep, impossible to ignore. Noah heard it. There was nothing that made him special in the eyes of the crowd. He wasn't a king. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a powerful merchant. But he possessed something that almost everyone else had lost: the sensitivity to hear the warning. And it was this sensitivity that changed everything. Imagine the moment. You're surrounded by busy people, chasing immediate pleasures, fleeting riches, and pointless disputes. And suddenly, a realization crosses your mind. Brace yourself, the end is near. What would you do? Noah did something unthinkable. He believed. And he didn't just believe, he acted. He began to talk about it. He alerted neighbors, relatives, local leaders, but the result was always the same: laughter, mockery, looks of contempt. After all, how could it rain so much that it covered the entire earth if the world had never seen anything like it? How could anyone take seriously the idea that everything would end when each day seemed the same as the last? Noah understood that the warning wasn't for everyone. It was for the few willing to listen and act. And so, silently, he began preparing what would be his only chance of survival. The first lesson this moment teaches us is clear and painful. Danger rarely announces itself with fanfare. History's greatest tragedies began in silence. The collapse of empires, the outbreak of wars, the decline of economies, they were almost always preceded by a period of apparent normality. Today, we're experiencing something similar. The world seems to be turning normally. But there are signs: deepening economic crises, increasing geopolitical tensions, technological advances that, while enchanting, threaten. And most people continue to laugh, distracted, numb. Noah didn't have the internet. He didn't have newspapers or satellites to show the advancing storm clouds. He only had his voice and his conviction, and that was enough for him to act before it was too late. Can you imagine the psychological toll of that? Each hammer blow wasn't just construction. It was an act of resistance against ridicule, against doubt, against human logic itself. It was a silent declaration that he trusted the message he received more than the opinion of the crowd. While others continued on with their lives, Noah prepared. And herein lies the first hidden code of survival. Preparation begins when everything still seems calm. That's when you build your ark, not when the waters are already rising. Archaeological evidence and historical records scattered throughout the world confirm that an event of catastrophic proportions occurred. From the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to the records of native peoples in the Americas and to African and Asian oral traditions, they all tell in different ways the same story. A great flood destroyed everything, sparing only those who were prepared. Some scholars argue that these accounts are not coincidence, but rather collective memory of a real event passed down through millennia. And here's the point most choose to ignore. If it happened once, it can happen again. The call before the storm is, by definition, subtle. It doesn't present itself as immediate chaos, but as an invitation to look beyond the horizon. Few accept this invitation. Even fewer have the courage to act. Noah was one of those few. And his preparation, physical, mental, and spiritual, is the reason we're here today, telling this story. With each step we take on this journey, we'll delve deeper into this hidden code, understanding how it translates into the details of construction, and, most importantly, how you can apply it now in your life. Because, just like in the past, time is passing. And so we come to the next point in this story: how a vessel impossible for its time became the only line between life and death, and what this tells us about what we must build today, before it's too late. The world didn't understand. No one could fathom why a man would spend years, perhaps decades, gathering wood, tools, and provisions to build something never before seen. But Noah wasn't just building a boat. He was building a boundary between chaos and the preservation of life. The dimensions were specific: 300 cubits long, 50 wide, and 30 high. If you convert to modern measurements, we're talking about approximately 135 meters long, longer than many modern warships. All this without cranes, without sawmills, without naval technology. The details mattered. Every measurement, every fitting, every bitumen seal had a purpose. At first glance, it was pure engineering, but in the hidden code, each proportion also carried symbolic meaning. The 3 floors of the ark can be read as 3 levels of preparation: physical supplies, shelter, safety; mental clarity, discipline, resilience; spiritual faith, purpose, alignment with something greater. This triad isn't exclusive to the Bible. You find it in Egyptian pyramids, in Eastern temples, even in ancient military treatises. And it's no coincidence. Every great survival plan must be supported by these 3 pillars. The materials weren't chosen at random either. The gopher wood is a mystery to scholars. Some believe it was an extremely durable type of cypress. Others, a wood already treated with natural oils to protect. against pests and rot. The point is, Noah didn't use just any available material. He sought the best. The code here is simple. When your life is at stake, you don't build with scraps. Use the best you can find. Imagine people's reactions: children pointing, men laughing, women whispering. To them, Noah was wasting time and energy on a useless project. But here lies another layer of the lesson. True preparation will never be understood by those who live only in the present. Each hammer blow was an invisible step into the future. Each plank laid was an argument against doubt. And then, the mystery of perfect proportions arises. Modern engineers tested scaled-down models of the ark and concluded that its dimensions were incredibly stable for facing giant waves. It wasn't fast, but it was nearly impossible to capsize. In other words, it was designed not to weather the storm, but to endure it. How many of us build our arks to endure and not just to overcome? Many seek quick wins, shortcuts, temporary solutions. But what weathers a storm is what was built to last. Back then, there were no shipyards. The work was manual, arduous, and repetitive. And yet, each day of construction was also one day less until the storm. This means that preparing is, by nature, an act against time. You're always racing against an invisible clock. And there was more. The ark wasn't just for Noah, it was for his family. For a specific set of animals, each species representing the preservation of life for the post-flood world. This requires something many forget when thinking about survival. What you build isn't just for you, but for those who depend on you. Ancient accounts speak of a single door in the ark, just one. There was no emergency exit, no multiple entrances. The door would be closed by God, not by human hands. The hidden code here is brutal. The moment to enter is unique, as when once it passes, there is no second chance. Centuries later, this door has become a metaphor for life choices that cannot be postponed indefinitely. In the modern world, doors close in different ways. Opportunities to invest, to protect oneself, to change habits, to start projects. Each has its own ark door moment. As construction progressed, the ridicule also increased. But Noah didn't stop. He understood that the mockery of others didn't alter the certainty of the warning. And here, another lesson. Those who build to survive must learn to work under constant psychological pressure. Finally, the structure stood, massive, solid, strange to the naked eye. To some, a monument to madness. To others, the few who were beginning to suspect something was changing, a possibility of salvation. But it wasn't time to go in yet. The sky remained clear. The sun shone as always. And that's exactly when the story gets more intense, when everything seems normal, but the countdown has already begun. The building was complete. The shelter existed. But what about those who ignored the call? Would there still be time to change their minds? And that's when we enter the next chapter, the last warning. The moment when the line between skepticism and panic blurs, and decisions must be made in seconds. Have you ever noticed that before something great or terrible happens, there's always a warning? Sometimes it's a whisper, barely audible. Other times, a rumble so loud it can't be ignored. But the truth is, most people don't notice it. Or worse, they notice it and choose to ignore it. This final warning is like an echo from an inevitable future, trying to wake us up. In history, this moment is marked by increasingly clear signals. A sequence of events that, on their own, seem disconnected, but together form a direct and urgent message. In the case of the Riddlestone, the final warning came not in the form of a letter or a miraculous apparition, but as a series of disturbing coincidences. The village had already learned to live with the strangeness, but that week, everything intensified. The wind, which had previously sounded like a murmur, became a mournful chant, like a distant chorus of human voices. The animals behaved strangely, gathering in circles. staring at a specific spot on the hillside, as if waiting for something. And then came the night of the black moon. No moonlight, no stars, just a thick sky, as if covered by a solid blanket. It was at that moment that a deep sound echoed from the mountain, like the slow rolling of a gigantic rock. But the locals knew there was no active quarry, no work to justify it. This vibration seemed to penetrate the chest of those who heard it, bringing in almost physical discomfort. Doors slammed shut and windows cracked as if an invisible pressure were trying to break something. Some residents swore they saw symbols glowing above the stone, symbols that hadn't been there before. The old guardian, a man who rarely spoke, stepped onto the square and announced in a hoarse voice, "You have 3 days. After that, there will be no turning back." No one knew exactly what he meant. Some laughed, calling it superstition. Others began packing their things, ready to leave the village. But those who chose to stay soon discovered the deadline was real. In the following days, strange dreams gripped people. They all dreamed of the same place, a damp stone corridor lit by torches leading to a massive door covered in symbols. Upon touching this door in their dreams, they would wake with an overwhelming sense of urgency, as if something behind that door was about to be unleashed. Tension mounted, and with each dawn, the feeling that time was running out grew stronger. Children cried for no apparent reason. Clocks stopped for entire minutes. The water in the wells grew cloudy, as if mixed with stone dust. And on the last day, the sky turned red. Not like a beautiful sunset, but as if it were on fire. The wind blew hot, carrying with it a metallic smell, almost like blood. The guardian returned, staring at the stone for long minutes, before turning to the people and saying, "What is coming can no longer be stopped, but it can be faced, if you have the courage." And that was how the village understood. The warning had been given. Now, it remained to decide who would stay and who would run. Night had swallowed the small village, and the sky seemed a veil of pitch black, dotted with a few timid stars. The wind cut through the alleys as if carrying ancient secrets. And each gust seemed to whisper warnings no one dared to understand. In the center of it all, before the ancient, abandoned square, stood the stone. It wasn't large, perhaps barely taller than a man, but there was something about it that defied explanation. Its surface was uneven, marked by crevices and symbols so ancient that even the oldest elders couldn't identify them. On particular nights, under the pale moonlight, these symbols seemed to pulse, as if breathing. Few approached. Those who did rarely spoke again about what they had seen or felt. Some, with lost looks and trembling voices, simply said that the stone knows before retreating from the world. And it was on one of these nights that Eliesta, same man who had received the last warning, decided he had to touch it. He knew it might hold the key to what was coming, and that to ignore that call would be to sign his doom. But he also knew the stone did not yield its secrets without a price. The ground seemed to vibrate beneath his feet as he approached. The air grew thick, almost impossible to breathe, and when he finally reached out, an intense heat coursed through his arm. As if the stone were alive and recognizing his presence, gradually, images began to form in his mind. They weren't simple visions, they were fragments of memories that weren't his. Ruins of cities he'd never seen, faces of people he didn't know, creatures that seemed made of shadow and light at the same time. And, amidst it all, a message repeated relentlessly. The pattern has already been set. The choice is no longer yours. The contact lasted only a few seconds, but for Elias, it was like living for years in a place outside of time. When he pulled back, his entire body was covered in a cold sweat, and his breathing was heavy. But deep down, he knew. He was now marked. The stone wasn't just an ancient object, it was a messenger. And the message left no doubt. What was coming was inevitable. The only question was whether he would be ready. And so he departed, guided by a knowledge he didn't want, but now carried as a burden and a weapon. Because in the enigma of the stone, there was no salvation. Only direction. The stone had spoken, and the images etched in Elias's mind still vibrated in his consciousness. But the answers he sought were not there. They were buried in time, in the forgotten archives of humanity. He knew that to understand the present, he needed to unravel the past. Because Noah's flood was not an isolated event, and the ark was not the only attempt to preserve life. Around the world, in remote corners, echoes of this story resonated. Ancient civilizations, many of them vanished without explanation, left traces that pointed to patterns far beyond chance. Elijah delved into ancient manuscripts, inscriptions on cave walls, and symbols carved into underwater temples. Each seemed to tell the same story: a great flood, a passage to a new world, a promise, and a warning. The flood was more than a sacred story. It was a universal sign, a metaphor for renewal and awakening. And, like every true metaphor, it concealed a vital lesson for those willing to listen. But there was also a shadow to this story, a warning that the cycle could repeat itself, and that the future was being shaped by the choices we made today. This was the message Elijah carried now. The past spoke to the present, and the present could decide whether the future would be survival or extinction. The sound of the storm begins to recede, but the silence it leaves behind is even more deafening. What we learn on this journey goes beyond the story of Noah, the ark, and the flood. It's a wake-up call. Because the true ark is not just made of wood and nails, it is built within each of us. In our minds, in our hearts, in our daily decisions. Have you ever felt, deep down, that restlessness? The feeling that something is coming, a decisive moment where there will be no room for hesitation. This is your inner voice, your last warning. And that is precisely where the power to survive the end lies, in the ability to hear that call. To act before the waters rise, before the doors close. Today, you hold in your hands the map to build this ark. But maps aren't meant to be kept. They're meant to be followed. If you want to be among the few ready to face what's coming, start now. Click subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any alerts. Here, each video, each word is another plank on your ship. Don't wait for the storm to begin to strike before taking action. Don't put off until later what can guarantee your survival now, because, in the end, the choice is yours. Sail in the calm of ignorance until you are swallowed by the waves, or build the ark that will take you to the other side, to a new land. The decision is before you. And when the first drops fall, it will be too late to regret. Prepare yourself or be swallowed. Thank you for being here.